There are almost 200 official countries in the world today, but there are dozens more breakaway states, determined to be separate, but officially not recognized. Some survive peacefully with their own borders, money and presidents, but others are a magnet for terrorists and weapon smuggling, and have armies ready for a fight. Welcome to places that don't exist. Georgia has a particular problem with breakaway states. After the collapse of the USSR, Georgia became independent. But three parts of the country, South Ossetia, Abkhazia and Adjaria, then broke away from Georgia. Conflicts broke out, thousands were killed, and the whole region has suffered ever since. I drove with my guide, Natalia, through Georgia to South Ossetia on Russia's southern border. On the way, we saw posters of the new Georgian president Saakashvili, who took power in winter 2003. The new president, who's supported by the West, has vowed to bring all the breakaway regions, which the Russians support, back into the fold. Although officially one country, this is where Georgian jurisdiction ends. Tensions were high at the border. Just a day before, 50 Georgian soldiers had been taken captive by South Ossetian forces. Well, these guys are now saying that we actually can't go back because the South Ossetians might try to kidnap us. We can't go forward because the Russians are ahead of us and they won't let us go past either. So we could be stuck here at this Georgian checkpoint.
The Georgians will take us to them up to the point where the peacekeepers checkpoint is about 5 kilometers from here. So then we'll have to talk to the Russians and Ossetians and see whether they let us in, because that's where the Georgian jurisdiction ends.
So we're in no man's land now?
Yes, that's right.
The buffer zone between the two is controlled by Russian peacekeeping forces, despite Russia's open support for South Ossetian independence. Georgians say the Russians just want to keep soldiers in Georgia. Natalia spoke to a group of Russian soldiers who are happy to explain where their loyalties lie.
The guys that are saying that they identify themselves with South Ossetians, and they're ready. They might be here as, on a peacekeeping mandate, but as soon as there's some sort of an aggression or some sort of an implication that there will be war, they're going to tear off, and that's how they said it. They're going to tear off their peacekeeping badges, and they're gonna fight for South Ossetians. But they were telling me, they were, listen, you are America's puppet, you know that. They're Americans training Georgians, now they're British Army training Georgians. You are the puppets of Westerners.
Can we just ask the General?
Ask the last question.
Yeah, can we just ask the General, what is his aim here?
Вы знаете, вот еще один вопрос, и все, поехали, хорошо? Какая цель у российских миротворцев здесь?
Чтобы здесь был мир. У российских миротворцев.
Здесь одни российские
миротворцы только стабильны.
It's only Russian peacekeepers here who are keeping stability.
The Russian general eventually gave permission for us to cross into South Ossetia, and we followed his army jeep to a South Ossetian government ministry to register our arrival. This is actually the South Ossetian Foreign Ministry, which almost sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it's a proper breakaway state. They formed their own government, and of course they've got their own foreign ministry. For 12 years, South Ossetia has existed as a self-declared country, with its own flag, army and government, but not recognized by any major state. The people here are mainly Ossets, who speak a different language to Georgians. The government has vowed to fight to the death rather than rejoin the Georgian fold. They clearly don't think much of President Saakashvili. We've got a South Ossetian magazine here, a news magazine, and it's got a picture of the Georgian president Mikhail Saakashvili on the front. It's hard to think of a more unflattering portrait. He's got the hand of America using him as a puppet. It's even got him with a swastika armband on, leading death and pestilence into South Ossetia. It's really rude.
Here's more news from South Ossetia. These are the Georgian troops who were taken captive or hostage here, depending on your point of view.
А почему вы эту захотели, а почему вы вот эту не захотели?
We were just doing this. Show the tape. We just filmed this. You just walked in when we were doing this. You see, look. Now you're happy.
Веселый мальчик.
Well, I think we've managed to basically persuade the rather tough South Ossetian woman in there that we should be allowed to stay. I think she was at one point going to kick us out, but she's now going to let us stay, and hopefully we'll be allowed to stay a little bit longer than the 2 hours they initially said we could be in South Ossetia. Oh, we're not allowed to film? Oh.
The capital of South Ossetia was attacked by Georgian forces in the early 90s, when the Ossets announced they wanted their independence.
It's a beautiful old building. And this is the South Ossetian flag on the roof. They're saying that where there's new plaster, this is where bullets hit the building during the war just over 10 years ago. Well, they don't want you to film that.
It's not take their pictures there.
Why?
I think basically because over there is the government ministry, maybe where the president works. And they're saying they don't want you to film that.
President of South Ossetia is right behind.
Ah.
Where is it? Which one is it?
Just over there. Can we go and speak to him?
No, we can't go to him.
It's the president of South Ossetia just over there. He's just gone now. And we really wanted to speak to him, but they're saying we can't. They won't let us go and chat with him.
They're saying before we take your tapes away, just keep going. Leave before we take your tapes away.
Okay.
I was speaking with one of the girls who is accompanying us. She's from the Ministry of Information, and she was talking about how they really distrust everything that comes from the outside, whether it's Georgia or the bigger outside. But we had an interesting chat about President Saakashvili, and she was saying how much people despise him, and that really his reputation here is that just he's seriously mentally disturbed.
The Ossetian government gave us a local guide who took us on a tour. First stop, the local market. People were reluctant to talk to us at first because our guide was telling them we were Americans.
No, not America. No, not America. No, not. Did you say America?
Yes.
No.
From London.
We're not from America.
From London.
From London, but it's not America.
Once our nationality was cleared up, people became friendlier.
Hello, hello. So they've got lots of produce, as you can see. Ooh, spasiba. We thought there was no food in South Ossetia. Ah, spasiba. Spasiba. Because this is what people say in Georgia.
Almost everyone in South Ossetia has someone close to them in the Ossetian army.
She has a son, and he defends us from Georgians. She is afraid that his son may be killed.
Many here have already lost a relative. Our guide took us to the grounds of a school, where a makeshift cemetery was established during the Georgian bombardment.
Here is a father and a son.
And they were both killed during the war.
Yes, but it's horrifying, really. It's supposed to be a kid's playground. It's not supposed to be a cemetery.
So Georgia did a lot of heavy bombardment during the war here?
Yeah, there was heavy bombardment. There was a lot of looting. Georgian army and paramilitaries behaved in a terrible way. A lot of people were killed on both sides.
What does that say?
After I've lived through all of these tragedies, I know that you, my proud Ossetia, will win. Technically our time is up and we have to leave right now because we were already stopped once by KGB here and they checked our documents. So if we're stopped again, we're going to get kicked out because our accreditation time has run out. But we might try to persuade them to give us some more time here.
To buy some extra time, we persuaded our government guide to take us to a local restaurant. But she wasn't happy.
I suppose she's got a right to be fed up. Her brother, cousin and father are all in the army, along with all her neighbours. It's a very tense time. Are you worried for them?
Yes.
Are they are on the border with Georgia?
Yes.
Is it stressful time for your family? There is much stress within your family?
In the back, we found a group of young Ossetian soldiers who had taken a break from the front line to celebrate a birthday. They were too young to fight in the last war, but all were affected by it.
Our fathers died in that war. Now we're ready to die in a new war to protect our freedom.
You mean you have expected this, that it might happen again?
Of course we knew this would happen because we will never allow the Georgians to rule us. Throughout Ossetian history, they've always tried to push us around. We've never submitted to that and never will.
There were reminders of the influence of Moscow everywhere. Russian President Putin is a hero here. We were running out of time, and the KGB wanted us to leave.
Give me a new tank.
Our guides are getting a little worried about the KGB guys behind us, so they want us to leave right now.
Spasiba.
Not at all.
Thank you. I hope to see you again. I hope to see you both again.
So do I.
We just couldn't stay any longer, basically. We had a certain amount of time we were allowed to be here. And the KGB, as they still call them here, were insistent that we leave.
The only opportunity for us to see the South Ossetian president, Edward Kokoiti, was on a videotape of him training with his army. He's dressed in combat fatigues. He thinks of himself as a military leader as well as a political one.
Yeah, he does, and he's preparing for war, and that's what he says here as well. This is basically to warn everyone that this is no joke.
Back in the Georgian capital, we were summoned to meet President Saakashvili, the man who's trying to reunify the country.
It's the president.
Hi, how are you?
Simon from the BBC. Hello.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. This is Will, and I believe you know Natalia. Where are you going now, sir?
I'm going to meet, there is more population of people from opposition ethnic origin that came here for demonstration.
Right.
And basically, well, they didn't expect to meet me, but...
You're going to go and say hello?
Yes.
And what are they out here demonstrating for?
For peace. For peace, that's what we want as well. Like, looks like Russians want to stir up trouble on the border there, but we are trying to keep things calm. We don't need any other bloody clash there.
And how difficult is the situation vis-a-vis South Ossetia at the moment?
Well, it's a very small piece of territory, but looks like that for Russians it's kind of marginal line of defense. God knows for what interest. So,
right.
On the one hand, we are trying to settle things there. On the other, it's the kind of leverage over us.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you worried about the possibility of conflict? Is it a serious possibility?
Well, there is chance that there will be clash, but we hope it won't happen.
He's speaking in Ossetian. Because it turns out these people are actually Ossetians who are concerned about war. He says, I'm praying, every night I pray for peace.
Georgia is changing rapidly. We went to an old Soviet base where British troops are now training the Georgian army in the tactics of international peacekeeping. Local medical students added a touch of realism.
The Georgian troops here, they're obviously not training for an invasion of a small breakaway state. This is for peacekeeping operations. But this is really why the Russians are so angry, because we're here with American-trained Georgian troops. We're now training alongside British troops. We're on an old Soviet airbase just on Russia's southern borders.
All they've ever been trained in is Soviet doctrine and war fighting. So this is completely new to some of these guys. Likewise, running, structuring, planning, scoping an exercise along Western lines, along the way that the British Army does it, is also new. So the whole thing is a huge learning experience for them.
Stay here, look out the windows. You look out that window, you look out that window. Stay here, okay?
How's it going?
Great. There, getting a little bit carried away. We should have stopped a little bit earlier on, but they wanted to take the building, and they've done a good job.
Much of their military hardware has been provided by America.
What did you think of how the Georgian soldiers handled things today? Were you impressed or by what they did?
It was quite impressed by their discipline, very aggressive.
Is that good or bad?
Too aggressive for peacekeeping, but in a lot of other aspects where they need to be aggressive, great.
But when we left the peacekeepers just down the road, we found Georgian troops preparing for war much closer to home.
They're not even going to see us if we do it quickly. There's tanks on the other side, mate. We were just trying to get close to a Georgian train that is just behind me, loaded with tanks, armoured personnel carriers and artillery, and they're shouting at us now.
Look, it's full of people. There are always people there.
Where?
Yeah, there is. The train there is full of troops.
Stop. Wait, 1 minute.
Keep filming. Just keep filming, please.
Yeah,
All right.
It shows that, you know, on the surface, Georgian politicians might be saying, oh, well, we're trying, you know, we don't want there to be a conflict. But underneath, the reality is they're clearly absolutely prepared for it. Georgia seems to have a real problem with breakaway states. We're just about to get to overnight train west across the country to Ajaria, which is a breakaway region of Georgia that President Saakashvili has just brought back into the fold. And that's the reason why South Ossetia and Abkhazia are so worried. We were very lucky to get on this train, actually. And we've managed to secure the final sleeping compartment, but it's the end of the train by the toilet, so we're not sure what it's going to be like. Well, there's a bit of a stink. So we're going to try to get the window down, but as soon as we push it down, it goes up again.
Oh, a tiny little bit more.
Oh, there we go, okay.
Okay.
Oh, we're right. We'll survive.
In Soviet times, the Black Sea resort of Ajaria was a favourite destination for Soviet holidaymakers and the old Communist Party hierarchy. But more importantly, it's the country's major oil transit port.
До свидания, до свидания, до свидания.
Ajaria spent a decade as a breakaway region under the rule of Aslan Abashidze, a corrupt local politician, before President Saakashvili took it back.
I think we need to have a word with our driver. He's an undercover cop, or he's got some useful props that help him to get through traffic jams. This is fantastic. Can I buy one of these? This would be so good in London. So he is a police officer?
Yes, it turns out that he is.
He's off duty. We should
Ну сейчас да, отдыхаешь.
Да.
Yeah, he's on holiday now.
Natalia took me to Abashidze's home, which he left in a hurry when the people turned against him. She'd been here before.
I was actually in this room 8 hours after he fled to Moscow after the revolution, and it looked very different. It looks so cleaned up now. There were glasses with unfinished cognac on the table. There were pictures, scattered personal photos just scattered through the floor. There were plastic bags with toothbrush and underwear, just personal things, boxer shorts of the ruler of Ajaria laying on the floor. It was amazing. Look at that. How tacky. How tacky is that?
Is this one of those ones that light up?
I think so. Let's try.
See if he's left any stationery. I'm running short of post-it notes. Oh, hang on. He's got some business cards. Imagine giving those out at a party. Hi, who are you? Oh, I'm the dictator of a small autonomous republic.
And this is an interesting room. And this is a personal room of General Netkachev, an officially retired Russian general. He was the man who trained the paramilitary forces of the former regime of Aslana Bashidze. And he was a man who was very welcome at his house, as many other Russian politicians, including Mayor of Moscow, who is a big personal friend.
What do you think, Will? I'm not sure it works with the trainers. I hadn't fully appreciated until we came here just how strong and important Russian influence in Georgia, in the breakaway states, still is. I mean, even now, more than a decade after the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia still calls the shots.
Georgia is still dealing with the consequences of the collapse of the Soviet Union. At this old military base, tons of ammunition have been abandoned, leading to fears explosives could fall into the wrong hands.
God, look at that. These are huge anti-aircraft missiles. These are the ones that each contain about 1.5 kilos of TNT. There's nobody guarding them. As you can see, we're just wandering around opening the cases. And these are actually really quite easy to turn into terrorist weapons, or to take the explosive that's in here, just inside the end here, and turn it into quite a significant bomb. Well, this one's locked by a piece of string. Hairs on my arms are standing up.
The rusty ones, they apparently are the ones that they found outside the base, ones that just people would steal and take them apart in the bushes, take copper parts and just throw them around.
You can see they're falling apart.
Yeah, and that means once they start rusting, they can explode on their own.
How many are there here? Do we know? Hundreds, thousands? Just in this room?
These are the 30,000 that they dismantled. Now they need to melt TNT out.
Scientists here are trying to dismantle the shells and remove the explosives, but they're hopelessly underfunded. I was then taken to see far more powerful rockets lying unprotected and unguarded. There's not even money for petrol for a lawnmower to cut the dry grass, a major fire risk.
There are 200 kilos of TNT in each rocket. One can destroy almost anything. They are extremely powerful. For example, a skyscraper, no problem.
How easy would it be for somebody to take the explosives in these missiles and use them in a terrorist weapon?
Everything is inside. That's why a small spark or static discharge will detonate them. You could detonate one with a small battery.
This is the fence around the base. There is no fence. There's nothing there. The director's just mentioned that soon this base will be reclassified. At the moment it's a military base, so it has 5 guards. Soon it's not going to be a military base anymore. So even those 5 guards are going to be taken away. And all these guns, all the missiles, all the shells, tens of thousands of shells, will be completely unguarded. Which is why we're not going to tell you where they are.
We travelled west to Abkhazia, the largest of Georgia's breakaway states. After declaring independence, they also fought a war with Georgia in the early 90s that killed thousands and ended in uneasy stalemate. The United Nations has an unarmed presence in Abkhazia.
This checkpoint is under Russian responsibility, and they're responsible for security here.
We'd been warned it would be difficult to get in, so UN peacekeepers said we could hitch a ride with one of their patrols through the southern part of the breakaway state.
So where are we now?
Now we are on Abkhazian side.
So we're in Abkhazia.
We are in Abkhazia. Oh, sorry. Sorry, we have.
So you can see the refugees.
Здравствуйте. Это официальные гости ЮН, журналисты.
Журналисты? Документы их, пожалуйста. И кассету пускай вытаскивают. Запрещается.
It's forbidden to take shots. Okay, we will not.
We're just crossing back into Georgia from Abkhazia because the Abkhazian authorities have refused to allow us in. They've been completely uncooperative and refusing really to discuss things with us. They just say, "Yeah, just kick us out." We tried to enter Abkhazia several times, but were refused, like many others. When war broke out with Georgia, thousands fled and took refuge wherever they could. Years later, this old tea factory is still home to a number of families from Abkhazia.
What kind of life are you talking about? Do you call this life? There's no electricity, no food, no water. This is not life.
They get electricity for 2 or 3 hours every 15 days. And they have running water only when they have electricity.
He told me his final wish was to be buried in Abkhazia, his homeland.
It's our tradition that we cannot be buried outside our country. We have to be buried in our own land.
He's now telling the story. He's like, oh, the easiest way to get to Abkhazia is to die and get yourself a place at the cemetery.
I wonder if we can lower them and raise them. This is ridiculous. I mean, what the hell are these? What the hell are they all doing here? How are we allowed just to walk in here?